Yeah, that should be it. Cool.
You want me to talk to you, not at the camera?
Yeah, I guess so.
No,
That'd
I think
probably be
I think it
best.
works better that way, doesn't it?
A little bit more comfortable.
Yeah, it looks less
Swim weight.
focused on.
Is this gonna fail me? Nope. So I guess, well, for the purpose of the camera, so this is for SPRT 2042 SEND&P module for level 5 students currently. Just really looking at your experiences, Chris, in terms of where your master's project has come from, in terms of where to do with background context or personal experiences that have informed your research currently.
Yeah, so I've lived with type 1 diabetes for 18 years. I suppose that is my hidden disability. And from experiencing sport in the way that I have with my football over all of that time, I'd never felt any kind of support around I guess my experience and what I was trying to do from the sporting perspective, from the organisation. So it was a challenging experience where nobody was supporting from that governing body, that top level. So I've always felt that there was gaps in knowledge, gaps in some of the key areas in terms of coaching, in terms of referees, the facilitators of the game have never really understood. So, I've gone through various different scenarios, various different playing levels, from schools, from into the world of the sport, and there's never really been what I would call adequate support for somebody living with my condition. So I sort of turned around in December 2016. It was as a result of a culmination of things, really. I think I was getting to an age where I felt more comfortable in my own skin about talking about what I lived with. And also it was, from my own sporting perspective, I just achieved probably the thing that I never thought I would in playing for my country at futsal. For anyone, that's it's a great achievement in any sport to pull on your nation's jersey. But for somebody that lived with a medical condition like I did that classified me as disabled, but I was playing in mainstream sport, I think it made the pinnacle of what I'd achieved, probably for me, felt even greater. So on the back of that, it was really about what I can then do to try and change, make things different for the people that were coming through, the people that were growing up, people that were still involved in sport and sport and education. And it led me to start a project that's live now, the Diabetes Football Community, which is going really, really well, reaching people all over the world, using social media, sometimes negatively deemed, but in this occasion, it's been such an amazingly positive use of it, that we've grown beyond my dreams, and we're now we're a company, and we've got followers from different points of the globe on Facebook, Twitter, and the website gets quite a number of views, which I didn't expect. But it led me then, all of those different bits of my experience, those years of living with it, to think about coming back to the university to do my masters, which then now we're starting to get to a position where I'm going to be writing my thesis and the idea, and it's very much around having a lot of the literature that I've looked at has been about type 1 diabetes, its management, the physical perspective of what sport does to somebody living with the condition, or how you should manage it in those different situations. There's not been much done, if anything, really, of, I'd say, depth around what it's like in a social situation, or what it's like, psychologically. All of these I would say, things that aren't so measurable, aren't so easy to get hold of. There's not really that much research out there. So my idea is very much looking at type 1 diabetes as a disability, play mainstream sport, and then we've put the Diabetes Football Community as a vehicle to fill the void between the two polar opposites, if you like. So it's how that community's grown, why, the reasons behind it, and why people resonate with it. What is it that drives people towards it? And is this a common theme that goes beyond just diabetes and football? Because those are the two things that were in my experience. So is it more about, you know, people playing mainstream sport that live with chronic medical conditions that might classify them as disabled, might not, but it might just make their experience within sport a bit more difficult, and how, you know, those challenges come to fruition and what we can do more to drive inclusion. That's kind of the research, that's the and that's what the project is doing practically.
So much going on to do with that, and how it's developed throughout the time of you obviously being at school. And you mentioned about not having the support that you probably perhaps now realise that you should have had. Is it fair to say that?
Yeah.
And what, if we're looking at that in terms of what you now know and from the research that you're doing, what support do you feel as though, actually looking at you as that younger child, would have needed at that point?
Yeah, I think if I took back time and went back to when I was at school, knowing the things I know now, there was teachers, certainly in a physical education perspective, would let me run everything, which as a child is quite challenging. It's both mentally a difficult thing. You live with something 24/7, to then have to take that on into a situation where your parents aren't there, say, I don't know, 10, 11, when I was diagnosed at 8, so I've got an experience, I suppose, 9, 10, 11, and then into high school. And to have that responsibility thrust upon you, knowing that, and I suppose you probably don't know the severity of what you're living with. At that age, I probably didn't know that if I got it really wrong, what the permutations may be. But knowing that you've got that, you have the control of everything, is quite a daunting challenge. And teachers not understanding what it is was, they would, you know, I would flag up that there was an issue, and they'd just say sit out. So, and go and deal with it, because they wouldn't know what to deal with it. They'd say, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm still talking. I'm still breathing. I'm still here. But am I actually okay? Because I've had to pull myself out of a lesson with 30 other children. They're all now you're going, what are the kids all thinking? Because I've had to pull myself out. So there's social, psychological impacts that me having to pull myself out, the teacher then going, oh, is Chris all right? And making a fuss, all of those things. And then the kids don't really understand. The teacher doesn't understand. And the way that it's dealt with is, or was, never great. I think they would make a big fuss, and you're like, whoa, I just need 5-10 minutes here to deal with this. But you've gone way over the top and made a big fuss in front of everyone, and I didn't want a big fuss. Or, you know, the kids, why does he get, real classic example, why does he get to have snacks or biscuits around sport? And you're like, in my head, I'm like, I don't want to have to explain this. I'm a child surrounded by 20 kids going into a lesson, and they're all going, oh, well, this isn't fair. And it puts you out, and it makes you not an outsider, but you feel alone in those situations because nobody gets it. But I think it's changing, but I haven't got the experience now to say how it's changed in education, because I've not been into schools very recently to say this is how it has happened or moved on. But from, you know, that's my school's experience 10 years ago. I can't imagine it's changed a great deal. And I think if I was to look, you know, if I was to try and say change, you've got to more education. It's just generally though, because as much as you might tell the teachers, the kids don't know anything either. So the teacher might know how to try and deal with the situation, the kids don't know either. So how you make somebody not stand out when they do kind of have to in a way, because their impairment makes them, is really challenging. But it can't be it will have moved on from where I was when I went through, for middle school, high school.
I think though, and obviously every single school is different, and considering it wasn't that long ago that you were experiencing those types of things in your own education, that I haven't certainly come across in my experience of teaching many, if maybe a couple of children with type 1 diabetes. And I think in terms of, as you say, teacher training and education, unless you've perhaps had a pupil in the class that has that particular or has been diagnosed with that particular condition, it's not preempted. You wouldn't necessarily have that pre-training in advance of that. And I think that is still the case. So I think it is probably fair to say that hopefully there have been additional things within that, the experience of teachers maybe prior to being fully trained, but only if children amongst the group have identified these, these health areas as well. So it's really, I think it's still quite a contemporary issue in terms of actually addressing it in advance of PE teachers fully, kind of NQT training years. And you mentioned there in addition that some of those factors that you experienced when you yourself had to take yourself out of those PE lessons, and as you put it, I think to go and deal with it for 10 minutes or so. If you don't mind me asking, how did that affect you as an 8-year-old lad, and in that environment? You say about psychological areas and obviously what the other kids are thinking. How did that affect you, and obviously also to the point of becoming very successful in your sport?
It made me guarded. It made me hide. For a very, very long time, I did not openly suggest to anyone outside of maybe my close-knit family or friends what I was living with. I would go through life, and there was actually somebody very recently said to me, I didn't even know you were type 1 diabetic, or you didn't know you'd live with it, and we spent 3 years together at sixth form, or 2 or 3 years at sixth form. I didn't even know. I chose to keep it very close to my chest because of those kinds of experiences where obviously I was with mainstream children, and all of my experience in sport and education is in mainstream. So as a child growing up with a condition that makes you different at a time in your life when you just want to be the same as everybody else, you just want to fit in, whether it's right or wrong, I don't know, I've heard other experiences that similar way, but I chose to try and fit in and would hide it. And that has been throughout my life, up until the point where I didn't even tell the national team manager of my futsal national team until he picked me in the squad that I had type 1 diabetes. So, and again, but do they really understand what it means anyway? So you almost feel like, because there's a lack of knowledge and education, hiding it is just a way of dealing with it and being able to just keep going with life in the way that it is, and there's that part of me that doesn't want to keep explaining as well, because you go, oh, what's that? And I have to write I hear people talk about diabetes. I see a lot of stereotypes. The newspapers talk about a certain type, which isn't the one I live with. So if somebody says something about it, I'm often going and having to change the way they think about it in every conversation I hear it come up, because they haven't understood that there's there's two different main types of diabetes. There's more than 2 types, but for me, I don't live with type 2, but newspapers, most of society's perception, if they've never come in contact with diabetes, is towards that type, that lifestyle affected, potentially later on in life, linked to obesity, all of that, which I have to fight against the stereotype. So it's sometimes easier to just not tell anyone or hide it, because you just don't want to deal with stereotype linked to a condition. Really, for me, type 1 diabetes shouldn't be called it shouldn't be called diabetes because you're grouping. I mean, they act in the same way. Well, I say they act in the same way. They've got similar effects on hormones in the body, but the way that they are controlled and managed, and the people that they affect are very, very different, and the reasons they come about are very different.
Yeah.
So it makes it a challenge, and I think I've always just I wanted to hide it rather than be open about it until the point which I already said, where I felt playing for my country at futsal was the moment where I couldn't hide behind it anymore. I felt it was the time to openly talk about it, because if I felt that way for that long, there's going to be so many other kids, people at my age, younger, older, that live with the condition which will have faced those challenges or will be facing those challenges, and to try and make their experience a little easier and to just put it out there a bit more in the open and challenge really where the difficulties have been faced for me, to make it a little easier for the future.
Has there been, in terms of, just coming back to the point you were making of the two main types that are always discussed, type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Again, for the purpose of the students within the module, do you mind actually explaining those differences and how both are managed?
Yeah, so type 1, the one I live with, is an autoimmune condition. So they say it's often triggered by a moment in your life, whether it's a bad virus, it could be a bereavement, shock to the system, which causes your immune system to attack your pancreatic beta cells, which produce insulin. So then your pancreas begins to stop making insulin because the cells have died or are dying, which then means that for the rest of your life you have to inject insulin, or for some people now live on pumps. They've got devices attached to them. So you're doing that constantly and monitoring your blood glucose level. So it's a 24/7 job where you're monitoring blood glucose level, you're dosing insulin for the amount of food you're eating, because insulin is essentially the hormone that takes glucose from the blood, puts it into the cells so you can use it to move and exercise, whatever it may be. And and you're without that hormone, so you'll spend the rest of your life monitoring the fact that hormone's missing by looking at blood glucose levels from finger pricks or from sometimes wearing technology that's now available, and injecting insulin to match doses, try and understand the other impacts that are around you, whether it's stress, anxiety, because they all affect exercise, all of these things that you can't control. Then there are the things you can control, like the food you consume. So that's kind of type 1. And then type 2 is, again, it affects the hormone insulin and how glucose gets into the body. But often it's because the cells are blocking the use of insulin to take glucose into the cells. So if you took somebody that got type 2 diabetes from maybe obesity, they often, the kind of permutations is that the fat from somebody that might be overweight or obese furs up the cells that almost blocks insulin from allowing glucose to get into the cells. So there's then treated more by tablets, and then changes in lifestyle can be more towards diet, and and sometimes tablets are used. And then if it's severe or it progresses, the type 2 diabetes, they can also then end up on injections. And then a similar way, the control of blood glucose is not quite as prevalent at the very start of type 2, but if it progresses, then you almost become like a type 1 diabetic, that you'll be injecting insulin and monitoring blood glucose. But at the very start, it's more that they'll try and control it with lifestyle, eating more healthily, and then kind of progresses to tablets and then injections. But sometimes it's, a lot of the press will pick up on it and say it's self-administered. It's not always. It's people get it genetically. Later in life, it can happen, to anyone. Again, but it's more likely to happen because of lifestyle.
Yeah. And previously you mentioned, thank you for that, sorry,
That's all
just to explain the differences between the two. You mentioned that you have this generic stereotype sometimes put upon you, perhaps because type 2 is spoken about maybe a little bit more so. Could you explain those types of stereotypes that are put on you, and also the impact that has on you personally, and also within your kind of, what you're trying to develop within the football environment as well?
Yeah, so if you think about diabetes on the whole, 90% of the cases of diabetes are type 2. Then 5% are type 1. So already you can understand where it comes from, because the majority of people that live with the term diabetes are type 2. So then they cascade statements like diabetes can be cured by a miracle pill or something like that, or eat this food and it will cure you of diabetes, or classic ones as a kid. Did you eat too much chocolate? Did you eat too many sweets? Is that why you've got diabetes? And that, I think that comes back to the point, what are the trying to avoid those stereotypes is why I would hide it, because I don't want to explain every time. And to somebody that doesn't care, that's saying it because almost they want to rise. Children, they're winding each other up, don't understand, want to say something derogatory to wind somebody up, and they'll come out with a comment like that. Yeah. And, for them, it's a throwaway comment. With somebody like me that lives with it every day and has to deal with it, and they don't actually understand how difficult it is to live with, it can have a far greater impact than they would have ever known. By throwing just that throwaway stereotypical comment, did you drink too much Coke? Did you have too many sweets? Why aren't you fat? All of these stupid comments that they would just think, it's nothing. But if you get that enough, or you hear it a few times as a child growing up, that's going to make you hide. That's going to make you not tell people what you've got. It's going to make you go, I don't want to mention it. Because I'm linking it back to those 3, 4, 10 comments that come in over different periods of your life as a kid. So you just go, I'm not talking about it then. I'm gonna climb up on it, and I'm gonna leave it there. I've obviously got to deal with it, because if I don't, I'm not going to be here. It is as simple as that. If I don't do the things that these injections, this monitoring, I'm going to put myself in hospital, and then the worst can happen. So you have to deal with it, but you end up hiding it, clamming it up because of these stereotypes. And I remember a few comments. You try and not remember them, but nature of things like that, isn't it? You don't want to call it bullying, but people pick up on differences. Kids pick up on differences, but they're not necessarily bullying you. It's just so much lack of understanding that they chuck a comment out there, and they're not really thinking about it, because they don't. The kids, they're not really going through the permutations of that comment. But it has, it's got more of a sticking effect for somebody that lives with a condition like that, and they just don't get it.
And do you mind explaining the procedures and the process that you have to go through to literally manage your diabetes at the moment?
So if you just took, I just take like 24 hours. It's kind of, so if I wake up in the morning, one of the first things I would do is check my blood glucose level, see what it is, respond to that. So if it's out of range, high, then I'll be thinking about how I can bring that down based on breakfast. So breakfast, I'll count all of the carbohydrates in it, and the dose, I have to match the carbohydrates. So you need to know the kind of ratio that you're on as well. So for example, if I was to take 50 grams for 2 pieces of toast, that would equal, for me in the morning, 1 unit for every 10 grams. So that's 5 units of insulin that I've got to inject. But if I was high, I'd be going, 5 for the food, and maybe 1 or 2 to bring me back into range. So there's constant maths involved. And similarly, if I was slightly on the low side, I'd go, 50 grams, 5 units, but actually I'm going to take it down to 2 or maybe 3 or 4, because I need to rise a little bit because I'm out of range. So you're doing that for breakfast. The same situation comes up where, you know, you're thinking, what effects have I got going on in the morning? Am I doing any exercise? So, or I was stressed, or I've got a presentation, all of those things. If I've got to come and do something that puts me out of my comfort zone, emotions affect it, physical exercise affects it. So you're thinking, okay, if I've got, I don't know, football training in the morning, or futsal training, I might need to take something on board. If it was futsal, the intensity of the exercise actually makes it shoot up, so do I need to inject? But with football, it actually makes it come down because it's a slightly different intensity. So to do two different sports but they kick the ball in the same way actually has a different impact for me with type 1 diabetes. So I have to manage the two sports I do very differently, which is absolute carnage. But you you try and manage that, come after that, and then you're thinking about, if I've done a session in the morning, right, it's going to drop because I've done the exercise. So the next meal, when I've got to lunchtime, right, so I've got, say, 100 grams of carbs. Because of the exercise, I might be sat in range, but because of the exercise, I'll be going, I should take a bit of the dose off because I've still got the kind of tapering of exercise affecting glucose levels. As the body recovers, it saps up the glucose to store as glycogen, and as normal kind of physiology works. And I'll be thinking, I need to take on slightly less insulin because I'm a bit more sensitive, and if I take on the same, it'll probably cause me to have a hypo. So you're doing that kind of maths as well. Then you're actually allowed to eat and have some lunch and stuff, and then it's the same thing, but you have to, the body responds in a different way. So my morning and lunch ratios are normally 1 unit to 10 grams, but in the evening, I have no idea why, but I actually have to go about 1.25 units for every 10 grams of carbs, because if I have the same, I just seem to edge up. So I have to change the ratio for my evening meal because that's the way the body wants to work in the evening. So you have different ratios for different meals. Something else could have happened in the afternoon. You could have had a presentation, you could have shot up. Sometimes I'll do a corrective dose if I've gone up a little bit higher, to bring it back down. And then when it comes to sort of dinner time, I'm injecting again based on all of the context around what I'm doing, what I could be doing, and then different ratio in management to then get me through dinner, out the other end, and then I would do my background insulin. So there's the 3 injections for meals are short-term, fast-acting insulins which cover the meals, and then you have a background one that you inject, and it's kind of sits there, and it's supposed to allow you to have kind of like 10 grams of a snack of carbohydrates, so like a biscuit. And essentially you should be able to have 10 grams and not worry about it, because this background insulin's kind of sat in there. And you do that injection sort of every 24 hours, and then every time you eat kind of anything over 10 grams of carbs, you need to inject. So 3 meals, and if you snack in between, you should be injecting for that as well. So you get out of there, and then the key one, and probably the one that scares people the most, is because you can control everything when you're awake. Everything's there in front of you. You can feel stuff. Some people sleep really heavily. So when it comes to bedtime, it's probably one of the most feared for many people, which is a horrible thing to say, because when you go to bed, most people want to feel comfortable, want to feel relaxed. If your levels aren't right, going to bed can be one of the scariest things ever, because I've read too many horror stories recently of teenagers dying because they have hypoglycemia in the middle of the night, don't wake up, normally associated to alcohol and drinking. However, it's a scary reality that if you don't get it right before bed, most of the time you wake up with the symptoms, sometimes you don't. I had a horrible attack when I was 13 where I didn't wake up, and the next thing I know, luckily I was staying in the same room as my mum and dad, but I ended up having a fit, and none of this I know. The next thing I know, it's 9, 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm coming round. But you are trying all the way up to bedtime to get it perfect, and then when you hit bedtime, it's like you have to try and maybe eat something before bed to make sure it's stays through the night, because you have to know as well, and all of what you've done in that day affects how you will come down overnight or whether you might go up. So you're trying to foresee everything that you've done in that day all the way up until you go to sleep that night, and then you've got to go try and go to sleep. So thinking about all of the stuff that's gone on that day, the way I deal with it is I just say, well, I've done everything in my power. And you have to go to bed knowing that you've made every decision to the best of your ability. If it goes wrong and I'm up in the middle of the night, then I'm awake in the middle of the night. But hopefully I wake up in the middle of the night with the symptoms rather than not waking up at all. Luckily, it's only ever happened once. Most of the time, if I've got it wrong, I wake up shaking, sweating, unbelievable weird sensation in your stomach, like with hypos that you just can't explain. It's like hunger, but shaky hunger. Yeah, and you just get weird sensations for that. But I mean, nocturnal hypos are something that you're never going to go through life without not experiencing them, but they can be really scary because you can wake in like a start, like, whoa, what's going on, and literally leap up because you just don't really know what's going on, because it can be a deep sleep and then bang, you're in the room because your body's just saying you need to wake up right now. So it's and that's just 24 hours worth of thinking. Really, that's just off the top of my head how I would try and play the day. But everybody else that's kind of just walking through life doing blissfully unaware of anything like that, can just walk in, buy anything from the shop, drink, bag of crisps, chocolate bar, bang bang, I eat that. That does not happen. Everything's planned, everything has to be worked out. There's constant brain mass going, thinking what's going on. It's the job that you don't want. It's a 24/7 job that you don't want, that you signed up to, and if you get it wrong, the consequences are far worse than any other job in life where you might get sacked. But in my case, if I don't get it right, I'm in hospital, or even worse.
It's just an extraordinary amount of stuff to go through, and I guess what I'm getting from what you're saying is you mentioned how the imbalances of the stress, or just a daily routine, or if you've got a presentation, and emotions, stress, as well as managing your food consumption, the timings of your injections, and considering what you're doing right now in terms of your master's research, that it must just be exhausting to continue to do that at that 24-hour example. But yeah, weekly, monthly, it's just a huge amount. Yeah,
it's for anybody, I'd love to take somebody to come and walk in my shoes for a day. Just that would be an eye opener in itself, just to say this is all of it. And I literally would talk and say these are the decisions I make, these are the thinking all throughout the day, because it's double the amount that everybody else is doing pretty much. It is tiring and it is exhausting but I know no different now. It's been such a long time that I've had to work with this. It just, I suppose, by having to work that hard just to exist, everything you do after that becomes such an amazing thing and an amazing achievement to do, because and it almost pushes me to try and do all of those good things, because if you can make a difference whilst living with something that requires that much depth and knowledge and hard work just to get through a day, and then you can do something on top, what else is there out there to stop you, really? So and that kind of links so nicely onto now focusing on your sporting career. So I know previously we mentioned about you feeling that huge amount of lack of support at school and in your PE kind of experiences. Could you now explain how you progressed on and did so well in your futsal and football career? Yeah, I mean, it was the type 1 diabetes really that's driven a lot of my determination to succeed. In some ways, like, some of the hardest things are some of the things that drive you forward, like the challenges. I think it's always pushed me and motivated me to go that extra mile to overcome it, and it's given me more ammunition than my peers around me maybe. But I think, I wouldn't say I was lucky, because I'm not lucky, but some people with type 1 diabetes have a real rough ride with it. Touch wood. I've had not a horrendously rough ride. I've had difficult challenges and moments where it goes wrong, and but for the main, I've done a good job at trying to keep it under control. Good job at keeping a focus on life over the condition, because you don't want to get too wrapped up in it, because then you forget about everything else that's going on. You know, the important things in life that you want to go and do. And I always kind of left that as the approach. It led me, you know, I obviously worked very hard at my own sport around the condition as well. Worked really hard at that. Luckily, I guess there was a big change around 14 or 15 when my condition was actually managed differently for the first time, and it had the biggest impact on my ability to get consistency. I'd always struggled with like hypos and the management side of the condition, which meant my performance was so erratic. One week I could be really, really good, and the next week just a shadow of the week before. So there was a big change around 14 or 15, which made a huge impact. It gave me control back, and I felt more energetic. I could get fitter. We knew a bit better of how to manage it, and it was the first, and I kicked on from there, and that was a huge moment in the conditions management, and a moment for me in what I could then go and do after. And I went from that moment sort of then to county teams, 15, schools county football, and then semi-professional youth team, reserve team at 16, 17, Worcestershire FA county under 18s team, came to university and was playing for the university's first team when I came as an undergraduate, and also alongside that I played for Bromsgrove Rovers in kind of step 4 of the non-league, then on Bromsgrove Sporting and stuff. So I'd become I was being paid to play football, which when I couldn't become a professional was always a massive goal. To be, to be able to be paid to do something you love doing is great. So I kind of ticked that off when I was here with my university degree, and just doing a university degree as well in itself was a massive achievement to get through that, and all the stress that it can bring, and get through DISIs like everybody else and all that sort of stuff is hard. And then I left uni, carried on being sort of playing semi-professional in the area, different teams, similar level, being paid to play, always nice, and managing type 1, and then the opportunity to play futsal came up, and somebody said to me, the way you play football, you'll probably be relatively good at futsal, you might want to give it a go. And I'd always seen it and always wanted to play, and then it was became a reality in sort of 2013, I think, I first started playing, and I fell in love with it really quickly, really enjoyed it, and from the enjoyment factor and feeling like I was playing as a kid again, really. It feels to me it's like on a court, and feels like you're on the playground, really. And I got to play for Birmingham Tigers, who were playing in the top league in England at the time, and I was lucky. I worked really hard, and in my first season I was player of the season, and got called up to the Wales national team for to train with them across the summer. And at the back end of that summer, unfortunately, I got an injury, missed out on selection, so I had to wait another year, and then we kind of got around to, and this was 2014, 2015 time, and kept going, kept playing, enjoying my football as I come back from injuries. And same with the futsal. And then 2016 came around, and I eventually got the call up for. I remember it so well because it was my birthday. I got the national team selection for the friendly against Latvia on October the 14th, 2016, on my 26th birthday. So it was a very good birthday, and I've got a couple of caps now, hopefully a few more to come. Had a couple of bad injuries since that moment. I'm pretty unlucky with injuries, but it's led me into some obviously hard work's led me into delivering some high performance, despite having a condition which for a lot of people can hold them back some way, and it's nice to do it despite having type 1 diabetes. But yeah, I've got no real choice. If I wanted to achieve something, I play in mainstream sports, so I go and compete with everybody else that doesn't live with that management side that 24/7 extra job that I have to do.
It's just a huge, from what you were saying previously about your own self-management as well, and then obviously going into such a high level of performance, and that just kind of highlights how well you must manage the condition throughout, despite, again, not having perhaps external people such as teachers, such as maybe the coaches or the people around you that would necessarily know the detail of what's required. So it seems as though that self-management is exactly, you said yourself, that hard work that's gone into it isn't just from the performance side of things, it's that whole, literally managing you and your body as well as that performance level, which is, huge amount to take in.
Yes, it teaches you a lot about, I think, having to do that and take those challenges on, and then try to achieve something that is an achievement for somebody without the condition. Like playing for your country, whatever sport, is an absolute honour. And what's taught me is a lot of mental battles, which I might have not have had with type 1 diabetes. The resilience, the motivation, the determination to go past something that's designed to hold you back, to jump those extra hurdles that I have to put up with just to, you're running 100 metres, I have to run 110 metres, but I've got to still beat you. That's the kind of thing that it's teaching me. That's the kind of thing that it's done. So my work ethic in everything that I do is, most people that would come into contact with me would say, is very, very high. Because it has to be that way. But I am highly strung, and it has all of those, like, it makes it, because you always have to be like that. It's so much matters to you, and so much drive and determination is sat there because you're taught it by what you live with almost. You have to get things like meticulous organisation and planning and all of those things to just get you through a day is what you take then into life. So you become that kind of person that's meticulously planned, who's extremely determined, got drive, passion, all of those things, because they're the things that get you through just one day. So you learn a lot from it as well. But I think, I guess the key is that the challenge is there, but you have to, the want and desire and all of those things that come along with it. I had to enjoy it as well. We have to enjoy all the things we do, and I've always enjoyed my sport. It was always a bit of a vehicle to get away from it as well. I actually find that probably the 90 minutes or the 40 minutes that I'm playing futsal or football is the times where I can't think about diabetes. It doesn't even go in there. But when you start and bit in the middle, lots of focus. But for those times, it's probably the only part, apart from sleeping in the day, where it goes quiet. Like the diabetes thoughts aren't there. So it's always been that kind of a really nice vehicle as well to forget about it.
Yeah. And I guess moving on to a slightly different topic, but also referring back to some of the things that you've mentioned, is how, what would you say to people that don't really acknowledge or recognise hidden disabilities, and also in the context of diabetes, which again is a kind of fluid subject in terms of disability right now, and from your research that you're doing as well, what does that look like in terms of a disability at the moment in the current landscape?
I think there's a challenge around how people perceive. Obviously, we talked about stereotypes and all that sort of stuff, but the people that live with diabetes perceive it in different ways as well, which can be quite a challenging thing if you're trying to get more support for it, because people that live with type 1 are by law classified as disabled. However, I did a Twitter poll asking the question, do you think type 1 diabetes is a disability? And 50% went yes, 50% went no. So when you've got that challenge around people's identity themselves living with a condition, I think getting then the support that you think should be there for an unseen disability is challenging, because you've got 50% of the people that actually don't want it to be acknowledged and don't want the added attention of it being a disability. But that's more from being stubborn and more from that drive and the determination thing that I talk about, which drove me, because 3 years ago I'd have gone, no way is it a disability, because I'm not having it. I can, I want to do this, I want to do that, and you talk about it like that. But in reality, what it does, all of the things I talked about in a space of 24 hours, all the things that I have to do, if that isn't a disability, as an unseen disability, I don't know what is, because that is the impact that it has on life is massive. And if it goes wrong, an even bigger impact, and that can, impact. It can happen at any time of the day. It could stop you in a lesson. You might brain goes numb and you miss a whole lesson. But people don't really understand that. People really don't really know that. But the challenge is that if people are seeing, type 1, as I am, and going, oh yeah, but we're not disabled. You're not going to get provision changed if you keep being stubborn and saying it's not, because it is. And the law classifies it in that way because it recognises all of the things and everything we have to deal with, whether it's a hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, hospital admission, and then all of the stuff that we just to get by in the day, just to try and keep yourselves in range. Because we're just talking about instant impact. There are long-term complications of it being for having poor management of your diabetes, which you want to avoid. First things that go, you can lose feet, hands, eyesight. All of these things come years down the line, which if you don't control all of the time, are likely to happen. So, but if we haven't done the whole, the kind of pushing it ourselves, then we are going to, if we go 50-50 on it, provision's not going to be forthcoming. So I think there's a step change within people with type 1 diabetes which could really help us generally in that unseen disability. But then you talk beyond diabetes and say, but what about everybody else with chronic medical conditions? Because it isn't just diabetes that have these battles, and somebody that might suffer with severe asthma or severe depression, severe anxiety, these mental health conditions which are not well acknowledged either. We are, as you say, we're on a very contemporary subject in the way that we're talking about chronic medical conditions, mental health. They're a huge part of society now. Both. Diabetes is growing, mental health is becoming a bigger part, spoken about more often. But in sport, neither are really looked at in any great depth. Neither are well supported. But I think this comes back to all of the things that we're doing, initiatives here at the university, initiatives like the one that I started the project, and the research that I'll be doing hopefully starts to get the ball rolling and starts challenging things involving chronic medical conditions and other conditions like mental health as well.
And can you go into a bit of detail regarding those initiatives and how you're trying to raise that awareness? Yeah,
so we're, as the diabetes football community, we are trying to, I got two strands that we're really desperately looking at. It's kind of education and participation. So we've actually got a conference here at the university on the 13th of May to do with diabetes and sport, focused around type 1 with different stories of people living with the condition and what they've managed to achieve, and some links to some sports psychology, some more generic ideas on sport. Working with the local football association, trying to do resources, education on that front as well, because I think it's important that what we do drive around the condition is driven from the top and not just driven from diabetes perspective, because if we want to change perceptions in society about a condition, I can't, from a diabetic perspective, relay it because it will reach only other diabetic people. Somebody like the Football Association reaches everybody. So for us to get education out there and to channel it has to come from somebody that's not diabetes related, somebody behind the sport. So doing that is key. We're also doing a video, kind of 24 hours in the life of a diabetic footballer. Again, working with one of the students here at the university to deliver that, which is a really nice project, and I can't wait to see that. Will be pushed on social media and on the website, a little documentary hopefully. And again, that will give some of the stuff I've talked about, give some imagery around, pumps, food, what you're doing at football and all these things. Very much education. Then there's a bit around participation as well, so I'd like to, in fact, in the next week we've got our first training session at the university for the all diabetic futsal team for the UK. We want to participate in a tournament called Dia Euro, where European countries have all got their own diabetic team. It's already been established in Europe for the last 5 years, and we're creating the first UK version here. So I've got 16 type 1 and a type 2 diabetic coming to the university to train, and we'll be hopefully picking a team to go and play in Slovakia and raising funds and awareness around that to try and, we're desperately looking for sponsors and people like that to help us deliver that. And then, again, off the back of that, because that's like a real big pin-up piece of, wow, hopefully a team, represents the United Kingdom, all that sort of stuff. We want to do kind of participation in camps, because it's very adult-focused, that, and over 18s, and a lot of what the diabetes football community is pulling on parents and children. They were looking for inspiration, aspiring to be professional footballers, be at the top, and having good role models and bringing them together, allowing them to learn and also interact with other type 1 kids that have an interest in football and have the condition. Because it's alright bringing together people that have type 1 diabetes and you sit them in a room, but when they haven't got the same other interests, beyond talking about, how's your type 1 diabetes, they maybe don't have quite the impact. So if we can bring like football and the fact that they live with the condition together, which is the whole premise of the project, you've got some really keen kids that are well into their football, and want to learn about type 1 and their condition, because if they don't, you can't go out and play. And it's a key thing. If you get it wrong, you're not going to be able to play well when you come to game day or whenever it is, or as sad as it is, kids can't really go out with type 1 and just play with their friends without thinking about type 1, without thinking about their condition. They can't just walk out the door, run down the park with their mates, because if they do, a hypo is likely to happen, or a hyper. It just doesn't. I've done it before, and I know it doesn't work. It's happened to me many times where I think, I'm having a day off, or I'm having an afternoon off, and I'm just going to rock up. And actually you end up not enjoying it because you didn't prepare, because then you go and have a hypo. So it's all that kind of learning that we can instill and hopefully have a huge impact on both the people living with the condition and then how people perceive it. And it's not just here in the UK we're reaching, it's people ended up doing an interview with somebody in Sweden, in Australia, people in France, the United States. We did an interview for somebody in the United States. So it's reaching, and it goes beyond just. And as I've been saying, I think it goes beyond football and diabetes. I think it gives a bit of a premise around chronic medical conditions in sport. But it's just that I've used the two things that I know well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, that kind of just that outreach work for anyone that wants some advice or guidance or how to get into sport, let alone those that are really part of that football community. It's fantastic. I guess just one more thing from me in terms of top tips, if you like, for practitioners. In this sense, obviously, from a teaching perspective, working with any children with type 1 diabetes, what your advice would be in terms of top tips for them in their delivery of PE?
I think it's not about being really open about it. I think you don't want it to be brought up in a big class. I don't want somebody talking about what I'm living with like over the top of everybody else, but as chats on the side. I think if you were to just ask a child beforehand, you know, how the type 1 is, you controlled it, how are your levels, having that basic understanding of what the condition entails, the management side of it, what are the key symptoms that were at either end of the spectrum, just having that understanding of how they control it. Are they on injections? Are they on pumps? Do they wear a continuous glucose monitor, which allows you to be able to see live what their glucose levels are? And then it's just about how you interact with them, because for most people with type 1, they just want to be seen like everybody else. And I think for me, that's what all I'd have wanted, is that somebody just kind of, how are the levels? Are you all right? And just checking periodically, because I don't want to, I guess, a fuss made of it, because you are in a mainstream environment, so you are going to just want to be one of the kids, you want to fit in, but at the same time, you want to know that somebody kind of understands you, and, just understanding, asking. If a teacher asks me, how are your glucose levels? I actually know for a second that they understand just a little bit about what I do, because they're asking me a fairly specific question about type 1 diabetes. What level are you? I'm 7 or 8. And you go, and then if they know that that's in range or a good level to start physical exercise, which it is, they'll be like, oh, that's great, good score, and that even a little bit of praise around the fact that you've nailed your number and level to actually go and play exercise, because I don't think anybody's ever praised me for actually looking after having another job like type 1 diabetes is. So if they were able to bring in praise to actually manage it, they'd probably get a really different response from kids as well. If just a little bit more understanding and a little bit more positivity around it, because for them it's as important as everything they're doing at school that day, if not more. But they don't get praise for it. They'll just get told off, not told off, but like it'll go wrong and they'll be like, oh, it's gone wrong, we can't come into class, we can't do PE, sat on the side. But what about when it's perfect or when it's right? Completely forgotten about. But if it's not looked after, it's life or death. So you don't. I think if any way that can be instilled would be, I'm sure that would change many kids' lives.
Yeah, definitely. And just they're fairly straightforward examples of just a few things that can be embedded within those conversations, one-to-one conversations, and as you say, just having that basic understanding of what that might be like for that individual. I think that's really, really good to kind of pinpoint those examples. That is everything from me. Is there anything more that you would like to add at all?
Only just about the project, really, that we've got some amazing opportunities in 2018. We're always looking for people to come and help us and support us, drive them forward. And if people want to find out any more, I'm more than happy to speak to people. It's exciting. The things that are coming up are even going beyond what I even thought was possible. So we've hit a nail on the head. We've really hit a sweet spot of challenging perceptions and society and things that have been historically maybe holding people back with type 1 diabetes and diabetes entirely. And it's a good time to get involved. So we've got, you know, all of these positive things going on. So if anybody that was, you know, watching, or any of the students that saw it were keen, they can find us on the website at www.thediabetesfootballcommunity.com. Search on Facebook the Diabetes Football Community, and Twitter's at TDFC Diabetes. So any of those channels really.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Chris.
That's all right. I don't know if I was too waffly or not.